New York City never sleeps, and neither did Elliot and Marjorie Halston. They learned that early, back when they were newly married, eating dollar slices on Broadway at midnight, studying zoning maps like sacred texts, and whispering dreams into each other's ears over the hum of subway trains. Elliot had a gift for numbers and contracts. Marjorie had charm, real, effortless charm, the kind that made people trust her before they realized they were doing it. Together, they built something that looked unstoppable. By the time they were in their 40s, the Halstons owned 7 luxury condo buildings across Manhattan and Brooklyn. Glass towers with rooftop pools. Doormen in tailored uniforms. Units that sold before the concrete dried. In interviews, Elliot liked to say, real estate isn't about buildings. It's about timing. What he never said out loud was that timing could be manipulated. Behind the scenes, Elliot embedded balloon mortgages into the financing structures, loans with deceptively low payments that exploded after a set number of years. He buried them deep inside legal language that few buyers read and fewer understood. He paired them with fragile HOA structures, intentionally underfunded, legally compliant but structurally doomed. To Elliot, it wasn't cruelty. It was leverage. If the market keeps rising, he once told Marjorie over wine in their Upper East Side apartment, we refinance, everyone wins. If it dips, we scoop it back cheaper. Marjorie didn't love that answer. But she trusted her husband. And she loved the life. They raised 2 sons, Nathan and Cole, in penthouses overlooking Central Park. Private schools. Ski trips to Aspen. Tutors, trainers, therapists. The boys grew up assuming ownership was a birthright, not a responsibility. By their 20s, both sons worked in the family business, titles given before experience earned. Nathan, the older one, was sharp but entitled. Cole was louder, more reckless, obsessed with image and dominance. They both wanted one thing. The buildings to be wide. The time Elliot turned 62, the sons grew impatient. Why are we still waiting? Nathan asked during a family dinner, tapping his fork against crystal. The portfolio should be transferred before anything happens. Cole smirked. Yeah, Dad. You always say timing matters. Elliot paused. For the first time, Marjorie noticed something unfamiliar in his eyes. Calculation mixed with regret. You'll get everything, Elliot said evenly. But not yet. The sons didn't hear wisdom. They heard resistance. Behind Elliot's back, they began pulling files, calling lawyers, asking questions they didn't fully understand. They saw profits but didn't see the hidden pressure building inside the loans. They saw luxury but not the rot underneath. Then the market shifted. Not a crash. Not at first. Just a tightening. Interest rates rose. Refinancing stalled. Buyers disappeared. And suddenly, those balloon payments Elliot had counted on delaying, came due. One by one, the buildings began to bleed cash. HOA fees skyrocketed. Residents sued. Elevators broke and stayed broken. Roof leaks went unfixed. The illusion of luxury cracked. Nathan panicked. Cole blamed everyone but himself. Elliot tried to contain it, but the system he designed was now too big to control. The first foreclosure hit like a gunshot. Then another. Then 3 more. Glass towers that once symbolized wealth were seized by banks. Units emptied. Investors fled. And then came the city. A deal was struck quietly. Temporarily. Emergency housing. Shelters disguised as transitional living solutions. Former penthouses, marble counters and skyline views, filled with cots, donated blankets, and people who had lost everything. The irony was brutal. The Halston name went from whispered in admiration to spoken with contempt. Elliot didn't live to see the final collapse. He suffered a stroke in his office, surrounded by contracts he could no longer control. He died 2 days later in a private hospital room overlooking the Hudson. At the funeral, Nathan and Cole barely looked at their mother. They were already fighting over what little remained. Marjorie stood quietly, dressed in black, listening to her sons argue in low voices near the casket. For the first time in decades, she felt free. Because while Elliot had hidden leverage in buildings, Marjorie had hidden something too. Years earlier, when she first sensed the risk, she had quietly moved assets into offshore trusts, legal, untraceable, protected. Elliot knew some of it, but not all. She hadn't done it out of greed. She had done it for survival. When the lawsuits came, when the sons demanded answers, when creditors circled like sharks, Marjorie disappeared. No press conference. No farewell. Just a letter to her lawyers. And a one-way ticket to Florida. In Florida, Marjorie lived in a small coastal town where no one cared about skylines. She rented a modest house near the water. Painted sunsets every evening. Orange, pink, gold, colors that never asked for more than they gave. She adopted 3 rescue dogs, all old, all unwanted. They slept at her feet while she worked. No one here knew her last name. No one asked about New York. Sometimes, she'd watch the news. See footage of former Halston buildings repurposed into shelters. See interviews with angry sons blaming markets, governments, their dead father. She felt sadness. But not guilt. Because the truth was simple. Empires built on traps eventually trap their builders. And freedom, she learned too late, but not too late to live, was never about owning the skyline. It was about walking away from it. Nathan thought he could fix it. That belief, I'm the responsible one, had followed him his entire life. When their father died, Nathan stepped naturally into the role of a temporary leader, even though there was nothing temporary about the collapse unfolding around him. Cole didn't want leadership. He wanted control. They met in what was left of the family office, half the desks gone, the walls stripped of framed magazine covers that once celebrated the Halston method. Outside the windows, a once prized building sat wrapped in foreclosure notices and city warnings. You sold without telling me, Cole snapped, pacing. I tried to stop the bleeding, Nathan replied. You were partying in Miami while lenders were calling every hour. Cole laughed, sharp, hollow. You think you're smarter than Dad? That landed. Nathan's jaw tightened. Dad built a house of matches. Cole's eyes flashed. Then why are we the ones burning? The truth neither wanted to say out loud was this. They had inherited not an empire, but a countdown. And it was already past 0 when the city officially converted the largest Halston condo tower into an emergency housing facility. The media circled. Cameras filmed former residents dragging designer luggage past lines of displaced families entering the same lobby from the opposite door. Protesters held signs reading, "Luxury lies," and "Homes aren't poker chips." Nathan watched from his apartment, one of the last properties still in his name. Cole watched from his phone, drunk, furious, typing responses he never sent. And Marjorie watched from Florida, the television muted, the dogs asleep beside her. None of them recognized the buildings anymore. Inside the converted tower, walls were repainted beige. Art was removed. Rooftop pools were drained and fenced. The skyline views remained, but they belonged now to people who never imagined sleeping that high above the city. A social worker interviewed a man who'd been homeless for 5 years. They said this used to be owned by billionaires, he said, gazing out the window. Guess money don't mean much if it ain't real. The quote went viral. So did the name Halston. Again, Cole was the first to break. He tried to outrun the collapse, crypto schemes, offshore flips, fast money with faster promises. None of it worked. Banks froze his accounts. Investors sued. Former friends stopped answering calls. One night, he showed up unannounced at Nathan's door. Drunk. Unshaven. Desperate. Just loan me something, Cole slurred. You always had Mom's trust. Always had Dad's ear. Nathan didn't invite him in. There's nothing left, he said quietly. Cole laughed bitterly. That's a lie. There's always something left for you. That was the moment Nathan understood. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about resentment that had fermented for decades. Cole left, cursing him. They never spoke again. Months later, Nathan heard through a lawyer that Cole had filed for personal bankruptcy, his name scrubbed from every remaining asset like chalk washed from a sidewalk. Nathan didn't feel relief. Only exhaustion. Both sons eventually tried to locate Marjorie. Not for comfort. For answers. For leverage. For whatever safety net they believed she owed them. They found nothing. The trusts were sealed. The addresses outdated. Even the lawyers spoke in careful half-sentences. She planned this, Cole accused in one of his last messages to Nathan. She knew. Nathan reread their father's old notes, margin scribbles, handwritten calculations. And slowly, painfully, a different truth emerged. Marjorie hadn't betrayed Elliot. She had survived him. She had seen what the sons couldn't, or wouldn't. That some empires aren't meant to be inherited. They are meant to end years past. Nathan downsized. He taught night classes in real estate ethics at a community college, irony not lost on his students. He never used his last name in class. Sometimes, after lectures, a student would ask, "Do you think the system can change?" Nathan always answered the same way. Only if people stop confusing ownership with worth. In Florida, Marjorie finished another painting, this one darker, stormier than the others. She hung it anyway. Her dogs were older now. Slower. She matched their pace. She never returned to New York. But sometimes, when the sun dipped low and the sky reflected orange on the water, she imagined the towers, stripped of illusion, repurposed, alive in a different way. And she felt something close to peace. The final Halston property stood longer than anyone expected. A narrow glass tower wedged between two newer developments, it had once been a boutique crown jewel, 27 floors, private elevators, concierge service that knew residents by shoe brand. It didn't fail all at once. First came the notices. Then the liens. Then silence. No protests this time. No cameras. Just a city inspector taping a yellow notice across the door one gray morning. Structurally sound. Financially abandoned. Nathan stood across the street, hands in his coat pockets, watching the paper flutter in the wind. He was the only Halston left who still cared enough to look. The tower didn't become housing. It didn't become luxury again. Instead, a non-profit acquired it for almost nothing and turned it into something no one could have predicted. A mixed-use building, low-income apartments, mental health clinics, job training floors, and a rooftop garden open to the public. People lined up not to invest, but to live. Nathan volunteered there once a week. No one knew who he was. He fixed light fixtures. Taught budgeting workshops. Listened more than he spoke. One afternoon, a woman tending tomatoes on the roof asked him, "You ever work in real estate?" He smiled faintly. A lifetime ago. Cole Halston's end didn't come in a headline. It came in a legal filing. Case closed. No remaining assets. No further claims. No obituary. No tribute. Just a digital record in a courthouse system, buried under thousands of others. Nathan learned of it months later and sat alone in his car afterward, hands on the steering wheel, not crying, just still. Some grief doesn't scream. It goes quiet. In Florida, Marjorie finished her final canvas. It wasn't a skyline. It wasn't a tower. It was a shoreline at dusk, soft, imperfect, unclaimed. She signed only her first name. That night, she wrote a single letter. No return address. No explanations. Just one line, addressed to both sons. "I didn't save money. I saved myself." She mailed it, fed the dogs, and went to sleep to the sound of waves. Years later, a young reporter published a long-form piece titled, "The Illusion of Luxury: How One Real Estate Empire Consumed Itself." The article didn't blame the sons. It didn't villainize the mother. It told the truth. That balloon mortgages don't care about family names. That wealth without wisdom collapses inward. That sometimes, the kindest inheritance is nothing at all. Nathan read it on his phone during a lunch break. He closed the tab and went back to work. New York still glowed at night. Different names on the buildings now. Different owners. Different stories. The city didn't mourn the Halstons. It absorbed them. And somewhere far from the glass and steel, a woman painted sunsets, a man taught honesty, and a tower grew tomatoes on its roof. The empire died. But something quieter lived on.